All right, so starting again, I guess this is just a common occurrence for me as forgetting to turn on that mic. But basically, we're talking about Niccolo Paganini. He's a Italian violinist, often referred to as the Devil's Violinist. An amazing composer. I would equate him basically to the Beethoven of violins. Um, and I don't even have this guy catching my drift. Alrighty. And so a lot of times I get the feeling that this guy doesn't really get the respect that he deserves. A lot of the music he was composing felt like it was mostly made just for him to be able to play. He was such a good violinist that he just in his time period there wasn't a whole lot of people that could compete or even really just kind of be on the same wavelength as him. And you know, let's just get into his life and kind of learn what he's about. So yeah. So here's a few representations of what he looks like. The guy's kind of weird when he's just got chops and when he's just got chops. So I would assume the page that's labeled specifically Paganini probably has a lot of good information about him. This is actually where I had learned quite a. Should I just start with that, huh? Alrighty. So he was a child of 6 children. He was one of 6. He was an Italian violinist. We went over that, and a composer, and considered to be one of the greatest of all times, which I'd highly recommend you open a second tab and put on some Niccolo Paganini. Just check out some of his music. I would do it, while we're here, but copyright reasons, I can't just play it on. I know he's been dead for fucking forever, but the issue is more that the performance is what can be considered copyright infringible. So go ahead, open a second tab, give him a few listens. He's well worth looking into a bit as far as his musical compositions go. Very easy to look up too. But getting further into his livelihood and what made him out to be what he is. He received music lessons from his father before he was 6 years old. Later, he had been sent to Genoa. He began to perform in the public and composed his first sonata at 1790. He was born in 82, so he was about 8 years old by the time he composed his first sonata. About 5 years after that, so he's about 13 now. He went to study in Parma, Italy, but it seems that the instructors there told him that there's basically nothing more they can teach him. So even at a young age, this guy's a prodigy. He's well within his own realm of musical repertoire. He's definitely got his craft down, even at a young age of 13. People that have been studying the music all their lives just are at ends of what they can even teach this kid. So, and after that, and there's a bit more to this. We can actually look up, because he had a pretty rough family life with his dad. Like I said, he's a lot like he's comparable to Beethoven, so it gives you a good idea of what his family life was like. Let's just go with relationship with his father. That'll give us a good idea. Um, he basically, yeah, this is a good description of how fucking fast of a player he is, and why a lot of the music he was creating then was only really able to be replicated by him. He had the capability to transform his minuses into positives. He exemplified in his 3 octaves that he played across 4 strings in hand, and he he had been forced to play so much that basically he developed a deformity basically in his hands, so that they were basically stretched across the fucking neck of the violin. He was able to hit notes and play exceptionally well, because I feel like a lot of the rigorous and, man, just damage to his hand that really just gave him the freedom of movement to get all the notes that he could. But man, basically what I was reading about this dude's father, and I wish I could find it, is that his dad would force him to play for 15 hours a day, and but he was forced to play for continuously nonstop by his father, and in the process of this, here it is. It is a great description of what I'm trying to explain. He at an early age, he was such a virtuoso that rumors began to spread about him. Some people said that his mother sold her soul to the devil for her son to be a master violinist. Whether you believe that is here or there, but I feel like he played into this idea about him more, and he embraced that that mystique about him, which only really just proved how much more of a legend he fucking was. Legend has it that Paganini's father used to lock his son in the basement for days at a time, forcing him to play the violin non-stop. If he did stop, his father would beat and whip him. Miraculously, the music never did stop. Paganini claimed that the devil would sit by and play while he ate and slept. So the dude was fucking losing it, and being forced to play for 15 plus hours a day, every day, for however the fuck your dad's standing there and watching it, I guess. It explains, like, because he left around 13 to go pursue other ventures. So I assume that's when he got to escape. But even still, he did continue to practice, and it does explain that over here as well. So it does seem reliable information, that his musical endeavors and his ability to hone in on perfecting that wondrous just skill that people just can't possibly naturally have. I feel like he really he was able to hone that, and he would make himself play for 15 hours a day. He started concert tours, which were apparently just win after win, dub after dub, from 1805 to 1808. He was a solo violinist at Lucca, appointed by Napoleon's sister Elsa Bicocchini. Bico Bacchiocchi. I'm gonna assume it's Bacchiocchi. So the dude's a fucking legend and a genius. He's probably about like 22, 23 by this point in 1808, approximately. And he's just fucking living his best life. He escaped from his crazy dad, and it doesn't seem like he hates the violin, considering he made it his life. Maybe he just didn't feel like he had a choice. But I mean, at a certain point, when you escape your father and you're still doing it, I think there might be a bit of enjoyment that comes from it. As far as these two resources we're going over goes, this one feels like a bit more factual. This one seems a bit more theoretical. So we'll kind of hop back and forth and see like the similarities, so we can kind of garner which we can trust and what's reliable information. Obviously, this is the more exciting to read because it strokes at those the mind's eye of what this guy's initial life was like, and his process of growing into what he became. He began touring the country. He was a violinist. He was the first violinist, apparently, who memorized his pieces instead of reading sheet music, which, if you don't know, if you haven't done a marching band or any sort of orchestra that involves trying to memorize a full concert, it's pretty fucking difficult. It's definitely something you have to train yourself to be able to do, and obviously this guy spent a lot of time honing that craft. He developed many fingering techniques, as a lot of people would hope, that are still in use today. I can attest to that. For example, he would deliberately mistune his strings to play in multiple keys at once. He would bounce the bow on the strings, which is just a fun thing to do, honestly. If you've ever messed around on a violin, like, if you're just messing around on a violin, I feel like that's one of the first things you just do when you're playing around. Just goo 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 goo. Just enjoy that bouncing of the bow, but he implemented it into his concert pieces, which I guess people didn't really think about doing that much back in his day. But he was a visionary. He was an ideas man, and he put that process into action. So good for him. He also could play 12 notes. We just went over. Oh wait, no, did we? Implemented second and 3 octaves of notes across the 4 strings. Sometimes he would also write entire pieces solely on the G string. Apparently, this actually started happening because he'd be playing so fucking hard that he just would start breaking his strings while he's like in the middle of concerts, and instead of restringing and stopping to rosin and redo all the shit that you just prepped to do, he just continued the piece on the strings he had left. And apparently it happened so many times that there was a specific concert in which he only had his G string left, and so he took this idea from that concert and just ran with it and started composing pieces that are written entirely on the G string. The dude's just, he's like, I don't even know what to compare him to. He's just this confused man in the middle of this unloaded box. That's the feeling he gives me when I try to think of someone that can possibly come up with the same work ethic, same ingenuity as this guy. It's also apparently noted that he potentially had Marfan syndrome. It's a genetic disorder that can lengthen limbs. And if it's in your hands and your fingies, violin strings aren't too hard to reach across. But although his fingers weren't particularly long, they were extremely flexible and multi-jointed, probably because of how much practice he was forced to endure at such an extreme age. I get the feeling that maybe the same thing happened to Beethoven. Did Beethoven have Marfan syndrome? Marfan. That the Gangling Abraham. I've heard of that. There's not a whole lot that says. Oh no, this says he directly had it, but everybody knows that Ludwig van Beethoven was deaf. Let's see if we can get some information from here without getting shit out. Medical scientific figure out how to treat such cases. Furthermore, Beethoven is not the only historical figure to go under bottom. Did I already talk about it? Everybody knows that Ludwig van Beethoven, god damn bastards, kicked us out. Okay, I was just talking about how he might have died of lead poisoning. So it doesn't seem like there's any correlation between him and that same thing. So he was just fucking deaf and fast and ready to play whatever the fuck came to mind, I guess. Paganini's motivation was both extremely intrinsic and extrinsic. So basically, he was ready to motivate himself and from a perspective that he just enjoyed it. That's the intrinsic. He had that internal feeling of wanting to enjoy that that craft that he's honed for so long and he's spent his whole life getting into. He, from the extrinsic perspective, he wanted the fame, and he knew that he could get it. I assume, knowing how successful he was at such a young age, it really gives into the idea that this guy knew what he wanted and knew that he could get it. It probably did help to have an abusive father to sit there and force you to play for 15 hours minimum. I mean, there's some evidence that proves that that's been known to be a success factor, as horrible as it fucking sounds. But I'd never recommend it. But it seems like that's what you gotta do. He did enjoy playing. He also did enjoy playing the part of the Devil's Son. Very thin and pale, Paganini would wear all black to concerts and arrive in a black coach, basically a hearse of his day. So he did, like I said, he was a boss. He played that part. He knew what exactly everyone was expecting of him. He knew just how to be the best version of himself, I would assume, is the best way to describe that. He just embraced the image that everyone else kind of threw on him, and that's the best thing you can do in a situation where you can be kind of connotated negatively, is to take that negative and just embrace it and put it as part of your personality and just run with it. And that seems like to be what he did. Either that or he was just a gothy teen that never grew out of that phase. I mean, he was locked in rooms most of his life. He, by his 30s, Paganini skipped practicing because he only delighted in playing concerts, even composing his pieces the day of the performance. So he's just one of the first impromptu musicians. Like it sounds like he's just one of the first blues player, really, where you just sit there and you just think of the sad and horrible shit that happens your entire life, and you just channel it into whatever you got in your soul and put it into the strings and let it fly. And that's what this guy, it seems like he did for 15 hours a day every day, and got tired of practicing by his 30s and decided his practice was basically the concerts themselves. Yeah, this guy was that much of a boss that he didn't even consider practice worth it, because he's just playing just as hard for the concerts, I guess. Paganini's life supports Gardner's ideas that extreme discipline often leads to quick success. So here's an interesting tidbit that I heard. I forgot who I heard it from, but basically there was this instructor that was talking about how he took half his class and made them and graded their entire work on quality, and the other half and graded their entire work on quantity. And so what happened in most cases during this I don't even know what to call this, unfair grading practices, he realized that the students that were producing the quantity over quality, their work was actually either on par or better than the ones that sat there and theorized and studied the way that they can make the best vase. So what that really implies, and you can take away from that, is that the best way you can hone a craft isn't to be sitting there and thinking about the best ways you can do it, isn't to be sitting there and thinking about what you can, what you want to do. The best thing you can do to get better at whatever it is you're trying to do to get better at is to just do that thing. If you want to play violin, the best way to get good at it is not to sit there and think about the best ways you can push the strings down, not the best way you can, like, yeah, that's part of it, but it's about doing it and gaining the experience, gaining the knowledge firsthand, and just applying it to the next big thing, the next small thing, the next thing in general. Just continuously try and try and try, and eventually you'll, as long as you're sitting there willing to critique yourself, you'll always be learning to do better. And that's a wonderful thing, and that's one of the things of extreme discipline. These kids were pumping out as many vases as they could, and because they didn't want to fuck up a vase and have to chunk that and waste time not getting that vase on that slab and part of their grade, they learned how to do it properly through the sheer focus, the sheer experimentation, and being forced to sit there and do it over and over and over again until they did it right, time after time after time after time. So it is definitely a big part that you have to not only have the discipline, but you have to just put yourself out there and do it over and over again to gain the discipline. Paganini played his first concert at 15. Over here we read it was about 13ish. Let's see, 82, and composes first sonata at 13. So that's just composition, and probably not his first actual concert. But still, that's definitely something to not gawk at. Paganini played his first concert at 15 in conjunction with his father's mandolin playing. His father was a mandolin player. Unlike many of Gardner's creatives, excuse me, jeez. I'm just gonna reload another real quick. Unlike many of Gardner's creatives, however, Paganini's work were pretty accepted during his time. The audience was often brought to tears, and another rumor surfaced that Paganini could literally hypnotize and control them with his playing. These guys were just fucking superstitious, or this guy's that's writing this article is embellishing quite a bit, because that's I mean, I can imagine the whole bringing someone to tears. It's like when in that time and day they didn't have like movies and shit that's like content that's readily available that hits you right in the feels. So listening to such a beautiful piece literally would bring people to tears. And you know, it can still happen today if you're that kind of person that's willing to sit and just listen with the deepest part of their soul. But as far as the rumors surfacing about Paganini and his ability to hypnotize people, that's a little far-fetched. Either they're super superstitious, or this guy's embellishing quite a bit. He would be mobbed in the streets. His concerts would sell out, and he was even considered to be music's first rock star. My personal favorite rumor is that the devil would appear on stage as Paganini's double and play with him. What the fuck? So this dude was able to play duets with the devil. So one thing that I heard is that Mozart was the first rock star. So let's actually just look up birth and death. Let's just go with that. 1756, 1791. So if you don't know who Mozart is, you're living under a rock. But the dude was a rock star. You should actually watch a movie about him. I forgot what it's called. I think it's actually called like Wolfgang, or oh no, it's called Amadeus, I believe. It is a masterpiece. It's beautiful, and it really gives into the idea of how fucking crazy Mozart was, and how I would say free-spirited. The dude didn't give a shit, and that is I feel like the epitome and the idea of what the original rock stars were, people that just did what they wanted because they could, and I guess eventually that got adopted into, you know, being punk. But I would say Mozart is the first rock star, and Panini here is the first punk rock star. Let's just stick with that analogy for now. That feels comfortable for me. So does Paganini actually owe all of his success to the devil? That's a question for you to ponder. Honestly, I think it was just the sheer hours and hours and hours of being forced to play that really gave him that ability to uh, boost his skill and his violent tricks, I guess. Apparently, there wasn't a whole lot of people that could do what he was able to do. Oh, here's another thing that we can cite as possibly truthful and, you know, um, good information. His playing of tender passages was so beautiful that his audiences would often burst into tears, and yet he could perform with such force and velocity that at Vienna one listener became half crazed and declared that for some days that he had seen the devil helping the violinist. Alright, so that's where that rumor probably came up. It was probably one crazy fucking schizophrenic dude that happened to be, at his concert. And, in that time period, mental illnesses weren't exactly a part of mainstream science and health. So it's very possible that there was a lot of people walking around that had some problems that could have been helped and led into a lot of other ridiculous rumors and just general stupidity. It's not stupid that they had the illness, just stupid that somebody who is sane would choose to believe that over the logic of the life they live. But like I said, different time period, they didn't have the same access to information, they had different beliefs. Superstitions were rampant, people believed in curses and shit like that, so it's not it couldn't be helped. Once his fame was established, Paganini's life was a mixture of triumphs and personal excesses. He was just a ballin' boss. He earned large sums of money, but he indulged recklessly in gambling and other forms of dissipation. So he pissed it away. On one occasion, he was forced to pawn his violin. That's having requested the loan of a violin from a wealthy French merchant so that he could fulfill an engagement. He was given a Guerriera's violin by the merchant and later refused to take it back when the concert was over. It was Paganini's treasure and bequeathed to the people of Genoa by the Violinists and is still carefully preserved in that city. Well, that was awfully kind. Niccolo Paganini's genius as a player overshadows his work as a composer. Yeah, that was another thing. The dude was so good at violin that a lot of times people didn't care about his other work. And it happens to a lot of modern day celebrities too, where they're just into one character, one piece of art, one way of life. That's kind of what everybody wants to see, and it's I'm sure it's just real shitty to get stuck in that state that there's more you'd want to do, but everyone expects something, so you have to do that. He wrote much of his music for his own performances. Music so difficult that it was commonly thought that he entered into a pact with the devil. So it seems like people were very much into the idea that he was fucking in cahoots with the devil, and I guess that's just we can probably take a lot more from that blog than originally thought, apparently, because this dude was wild and people thought he was wild. His companions included 24 caprices published in compositions. I was gonna say this guy had a lot of friends. His compositions included 24 caprices published in 1820 for unaccompanied violin that are among the most difficult works ever written for the instrument. He also challenged musicians with such compositions as his 12 sonatas for violin and guitar, 6 violin concerti, and 6 quartets for violin, viola, cello, and guitar. The dude loved his stringed instruments, as you can tell. If you've played a string instrument and it's not like something wonky like a fucking banjo or a ukulele where the strings are all misplaced, it's still kind of difficult, but you could definitely have a better idea of how the notes can be played to your advantage. So he definitely was able to take his violin techniques and probably apply them very easily to other stringed instruments. Violin, if you're not aware, is one of the harder instruments to be able to play and to play well, and he was good at that, so it wouldn't be any surprise to see that he does other things well too. According to Philip Sandblum in his book Creative and Disease, few geniuses have experienced such lucky agonies as Paganini, bedeviled by a host of chronic complaints, including Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, marked by excessive flexibility of the joints. So there's that other thing. He definitely had some flexible joints. We're seeing that kind of brought up multiple times. This enabled Paganini to perform the astonishing double stoppings and roulades for which he was famous. Sandblum writes, his wrist was so loose that he could move and twist it in all directions. Although his hands was not disproportional, he could thus double its reach and play in the first 3 positions without shifting. So a violin's neck is about roughly that long. So if he was playing like down here, he's able to play up there like fucking nothing. He literally can double the span of his like reach. So imagine like that shit. Dude's wild with his finger techniques, as we've learned earlier. In performances, Paganini enjoyed playing tricks like tuning one of his strings a semi-note high, or playing the majority of a piece on one string after breaking the other 3. Another piece of information that carries over. So that guy definitely, it seems like we could take away a lot. He astounded audiences with techniques that include harmonics, double stops, pizzicato with the left as well as the right hand, and nearly impossible fingerings and bowings. Antonia Bianchi, a singer who toured with Niccolo in 1825, bore him a son. The dude had a kid. That's surprising, honestly, and I would hate to be his son. I get the feeling this dude... I would assume the apple wouldn't fall far from the tree in that period, but apparently Cyrus Alexander on July 23, 1825 is his son's name when he was born. It's kind of weird that he doesn't have Paganini as his last name or Bianchi, but let's continue. Although they were never married, he did lavish affection on his son for the rest of his life. So he broke the cycle, he broke that chain, which is very important in a time period like that. Known as a gambler, he unsuccessfully attempted to open a gambling casino in Paris in 1838. He gambled on a gambling casino and lost the draw. Later, he moved to Marseilles, and then to Nice, France, where he died on May 27th, 1840. He was born 882 and died in 40, so he lived about 58 years approximately. So that's a good life. Good life in that time period. So he seems to, at some point, got his shit together. He was able to care for his son. I mean, he didn't do so well with the gambling and his gamble with the gambling hall, but for the most part, his life seems to have worked out a lot better than Mozart. So I would say that's a score on his part. Let's see if he had like any like mental illnesses that would have been like Paganini's creativity may have been influenced by his biochemical makeup. Referred to as a demon violinist, he apparently has a lot of names that refer to either demons or the devil, and I guess for good reason he would duet with him often. He could play his first violin concerto with a swiftness that amazed the fellow violinist. Numerous compositions played to extraordinary rapidity. Undoubtedly, the musician's virtuosity was possible in part because of his remarkably flexible joints. We heard about that. Hereditary disease of connective tissue. Heard about that. Judging from Paganini's physical appearance, the most likely cause of his... Okay, so it doesn't seem like he had a whole lot of mental illnesses, which is very surprising. I feel like with his upbringing and his work ethic, he had a few screws loose up in there. But I guess he just really just enjoyed the violin, and not even to an unhealthy extent. It was almost like he enjoyed gambling more to an unhealthy extent than playing his violin. I think his father had the unhealthy fixation with his son being a famous violinist, or maybe he just really wanted to play with his son, and then his son got too good and he just wanted to keep hearing him play. I don't know, but that's kind of unexpected, really. Moving on, like, I don't know what else to look up about this guy. He seems to be very well adjusted. He's just a prodigy growing up and just a genius when he died. Maybe we can learn a little bit more about him through his parents. Get the feeling... Italian virtuoso may be the perfect example of nature meets nurture. Taught the violin by his father. The dude, yeah. Let's see if he had a weird sex life. You ever wonder that about that when it comes to celebrities? Weird sexual habits. I probably actually shouldn't look that up. I'm probably gonna pull up some let's just not get banned from YouTube before we ever actually get more than 5 subscribers. But if you are enjoying the content so far, definitely please feel free to give a subscription, give a like, let us know in the comments what you're enjoying. Feel free to give us ideas of what to talk about next. Obviously, this episode's about classical music, so if you have anything you'd like to talk about, like to bring up, definitely don't hesitate to just give a suggestion. In the meantime, let's just take a look at Ludwig Beethoven, not the streamer. Crazy life. 19 things we probably didn't know. Maybe we'll learn something. He was a third Ludwig in the family, so not that interesting. Beethoven's father hustled his son into performing. Early on, Johann von Beethoven noticed the boy's penchant for playing. He set his sights on creating a prodigy, just as Mozart had been a couple of decades before. Johann forced his son to practice day and night to reach the same level of genius. Neighbors of Beethoven remembered the small boy standing on a bench to reach the keyboard, crying as his father loomed over him. The dude was barely even able to reach the keys, and he was forced into... I mean, and at least Paganini was able to fucking hold his instrument. This kid was just being forced to really just fuck his shit up for his dad. Was Mozart abused in childhood? I guess just in general. Let's just go with in general. I know he was actually taken advantage of during his stint alive. The rehabilitation of Leopold Mozart, who had long loomed over his son's biography as an oppressive, even abusive figure. So that doesn't sound right. The shady truth about Mozart's father. He's not only the most famous classical music composer of all time, he also well known for having been a child prodigy. He began showing evidence of his extraordinary ability at a young age, recognized his son's talents, and jumped at the chance to become what would be today's referred as a stage parent. Wolfgang started playing the violin and harpsichord at just 3 years old. Guess you gotta start him young for the violin. And was proficient by 5. At that point, he also began creating his own compositions, which Leopold would help him write down. So this dude was just having his son be his little music box, which seems pretty fucking what's the word, niche for these people. I guess to be a great composer, you had to have a father that forced you to sit down and play. Back to Beethoven. Having left school at age 11 to help with household income, Beethoven never learned how to multiply or divide. To his last day, if he had to multiply, say, 60 times 52, he'd lay out 60 52 times and add them up. I mean, 60 times 52 is a bit of a weird one. And I get the feeling that their mathematics back in that day wasn't the same as ours. But at least he knew how to do it. That's the important thing, is he knew how to multiply 60 and 52 together. He was a notorious daydreamer. Once, while speaking to family friend Galicia Fischer, she noticed him zoning out. When she demanded a reply to what she'd said, his answer was, "I was just occupied with such a lovely deep thought, I couldn't bear to be disturbed."
I mean, we've all been there, I feel. I don't think that's so much of the dude was a mystery. Whenever people are prodigies of that degree, um, I feel like they get stuck in their head sometimes, and I get the feeling a lot of people nowadays to do it too. Maybe not to the extent that they'll be in the middle of a conversation, unless it's just really fucking. Maybe she was a really boring person, and we've all zoned out during someone just going on and talking about fucking nothing like I'm doing now. So I think we can all kind of get that feeling of zoning out when somebody's talking with or at them, and then just being like, what I was thinking of was better than what you were saying. Um, on his first visit to Vienna, 17-year-old Ludwig van Beethoven performed for Mozart. Oh, wow. That's interesting. Mozart, then the greatest composer in Vienna, was generally unimpressed with other musicians ahead of his um, being so far ahead of his peers in talent and accomplishment. No one really knows what happened in the recital, but apocryphalia, blah blah blah. Mozart allegedly walked out of the room saying, "Keep your eyes on him. Someday he'll give the world something to talk about." So, to get praise like that from Mozart, who was just the fucking greatest of all time, it's like, I don't know, like if you were Babe Ruth and he saw you at batting practice and was like, "That's keep your eye on that guy." Or Michael Jordan just sees some kid at tryouts and is like, "That's the one you want to watch." So it's definitely. I mean, I'd put that down in my resume. Mozart loved my shit in my quill pen and fountain ink. Ludwig van Beethoven's performances were known for improvisation. So I guess Paganini wasn't the first improvative musician. Um, it's just a genius thing, I guess. And it is a lot harder to do that. I to just be able to play and know what you're gonna play before you play it as you're playing it. Takes a lot of thought process that even a lot of musicians that play for years, it's still kind of hard for them to keep track of. So improvising, um, especially in a concert, must have been fun for these people. Probably not as much of a challenge as you'd imagine for someone nowadays, I feel. But definitely, it must have been just fun for them. Learned from Haydn. I don't know who that is. After moving to Vienna in the early 20s, 1920s, Beethoven took lessons from Joseph Haydn, father of the symphony. As per Beethoven's habit with teachers, the two often got frustrated with each other and ultimately didn't like each other. Well, I mean, when you got so many good ideas, a lot of people don't want to listen to them. So that's, I'm sure, at a point, that's how Beethoven felt that, you know, he's proved himself so much already that it's unfair for someone to not at least hear him out. Let's look up Joseph Haydn. Joseph Haydn. Let's just. Known as the father of symphony. Born March 31st, 1732. Rohar, Austria. Austrian composer who was one of the most important figures in the development of classical style in music during the 18th century. He helped establish the forms and styles for string quartet and the symphony. So basically, the guy that laid down the brickwork for um, fucking classical music in general did not like him. Not because he wasn't good, but just because they had conflicting ideas, I'm sure. And maybe even if he had his way a bit more, and Joseph Haydn probably listened to his ideas a bit more and implemented them into his own work, maybe classical music might be different to today's standard than what it is now, like what it could have been. So, especially with how influential apparently Joseph Haydn was, maybe that's another person we should give a listen to at some point. Don't forget to write that down in your own personal catalog, to just take a second to listen to some Joseph Haydn. He was a second son of humble parents. His father was a wheelwright, his mother, before her marriage, a cook for the lords of the village. That doesn't sound like a bad job. I mean, you're always in the kitchen, you always got food around you. And a cousin who was a school principal and choir master in the nearby city of Hamburg offered to take him into his home and train him. So again, he showed musical talent early on in childhood and was sent away at the tender age of before 10. Seems like he was brought up in a mostly religious musical setting. He learned to play various instruments and obtained a good basic knowledge of music. I feel like it was a bit more than a basic knowledge if he was the father of symphony. Choirster at the Austrian capital's most important church. Haydn's parents accepted the offer, and thus in 1740 Haydn moved to Vienna. He stayed at the choir school for 9 years, acquiring an enormous practical knowledge of music by constant performances, but to his disappointment, receiving little instruction in music theory. He had to work hard to fulfill. I mean, it feels like a lot of this was in a time where music theory wasn't a huge thought process. It was more of something that was thought of by the people that were gonna lay it down. It didn't seem like there was a whole lot of people that were really just writing texts and how-to guides for other musicians to do the things that they want to do. And it just seemed like Paganini, Joseph Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, they were just the ones that figured that shit out on their own and then wrote it down in a way that other composers could understand, which was the most important and best thing they could possibly do, is just get that work down and share that knowledge of how they fucking did it. And especially because it seems like it was in a time where, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of music theory to begin with. Music theory in itself was a theory. But, you know, these people that really want to learn and have that persistence and force themselves to practice for hours and hours and hours, they get to that point where they learn it. It's like the whole vase analogy. They kept doing it over and over and over again, and because they wanted to do it right the next time and the next time, eventually they started doing it right. And that's just what you got to do, is you got to keep putting it out there and keep doing it, and eventually you'll learn the skills you need to know and learn yourself. And again, just want to lay it out there. If you're enjoying the content, if you're enjoying what we're talking about, have any ideas, hit the subscribe button, lay down a chat just to let us know what you like. Hit the like button. It does help a lot, and it helps me feel better. So carrying on. With no money and few possessions, Haydn at 17 was left to his own devices. He found refuge for a while in the garret of a fellow musician and supported himself miserably with odd musical jobs. I guess like one-man band style shit. He must have decided the religious aspect wasn't making him enough money. Choose gold over God. He meanwhile undertook arduous courses of self-instruction. That's what you gotta do. If you want to do something and nobody else is willing to teach you, you gotta teach yourself through the study of musical works, notably those of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach and of leading manuals of musical theory. A fortunate chance brought him to the attention of the Italian composer and singer teacher Niccolo Porpora. These fucking names are so wild. Who accepted him and accompanist as an accompanist for voice lessons and corrected Haydn's compositions. So he edited his work for him, basically. With persistence and energy, Haydn made progress. He was eventually introduced to the music-loving Austrian nobleman Karl Joseph von Fernberg, in whose home he played chamber music. For the instrumentalist, there he wrote his first string quartets. So it took him a bit, but he finally got himself on his own feet. And it was through apparently luck and chance was a big piece of it, which makes a lot of sense. That's how it seemed to be a lot back in the day when discoverability between people was very low. You just had to be in the right place at the right time, and hopefully you get it. He was engaged as musical director and chamber composer for the Bohemian court Ferdinand Maximilian von Morsen. Haydn was put in charge of an orchestra of about 16 musicians, and for this ensemble he wrote his first symphony, as well as numerous divertimenti for wind band or for wind instruments and strings. These early musical compositions were still conventional in character, yet a certain freshness of melodic invention and sparkle marked them as the work of a future master. So it's basically like we had hip-hop and we were loving it, and then it started to get a bit stale, and then lo-fi hip-hop came out, and so it just kind of freshened up the field again. So he's like the lo-fi hip-hop of symphony. But yeah, no, he carved out his own niche, and he made himself what he was, the father of symphony, apparently. And it seems like apparently all fucking musicians end up hitting some financial destitute. Haydn stayed only briefly with von Morsen as financial difficulties forced his patron to dismiss the orchestra. So that was actually the person taking care of him that hit financial difficulties. Soon Haydn was invited to enter the service of Prince Paul Antal Esterhazy. The Esterhazys were one of the wealthiest and most influential families of Austrian Empire and boasted a distinguished record of supporting music. So they were just some music-loving royalty, which It's fantastic for the time period. But like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of media going around, so it was either going to concerts or watching a play. Or I guess gambling and drinking. Performing regularly in his castle in Enstad, a small town some 30 miles from Vienna. Because his aged music director was ailing, the prince appointed the relatively unknown Haydn to be assistant conductor. So again, he just got fucking lucky. He was just in the right place at the right time, and the right dude was dying, and he was given the right job. Haydn conducted the orchestra and coached. They fucked my shit up. And coached the singers in almost daily rehearsals, composed most of the music required, and served as chief of the musical personnel. So he did it all. He wrote their music, he made sure they were doing it right, he made sure everyone was hitting their rehearsals. He carried out his duties extremely well and revealed tact, good nature, and skill in dealing with people. From his first symphonies, if he apparently he was real good with people, but Beethoven is just a fucking asshole. From his first symphonies written for the Esterházys, Haydn amply displayed his characteristic good humor and wit, as well as dependable freshness of his musical ideas. Although full maturity would come later, his employment by the Esterházy family proved decisive for his career, and he remained in their service until his death. So he landed a lifetime gig. And this is the guy that taught Beethoven for a little bit before Beethoven turned out to just be a fucking asshole and split ways. So that was the father of symphony, Joseph Haydn. Definitely another person. I'm actually going to write that down to give a small listen to later. Yeah. Joseph Haydn. Joseph Haydn. Ludwig van Beethoven pioneered composition for piano. We all know that. He kind of, it seems like he did a lot of what Joseph Haydn did. He took some lo-fi beats and made them even more lo-fi. And honestly, from what I understand, Beethoven's work compared to his peers was a lot more heavy and I want to say more rock-esque compared to the other people. Or no, that was Mozart. I'm getting mixed up with my composers, but yeah, no, he definitely did pioneer a lot of the way. He accomplished a lot for who he was. Romantically, Ludwig had mixed results, which apparently is also a shared trait amongst these people that have this crazy amount of talent. Is they can't sustain relationships very well. And honestly, if we wanted to really think about the state of mentality, it's possible that all these people could have also had what's the word? A form of Dexter from that one show. Dexter is one sociopath. They could be sociopaths. A lot of times, some of the characteristics of sociopaths are these grandiose ideas about themselves. Um, they can't have meaningful relationships very easily. It's harder for them to maintain it. And A lot of times, often associated with sociopaths, is a higher IQ. And IQ, if you're not really well aware of it, it's not really a intelligence thing. It's an ability to see patterns, is the way that I kind of understood it when I took my first IQ test. That's kind of how it seemed. Is it was just asking me how to continue patterns in a way, or what fit in a certain criteria. So it's just being able to take and analyze information, and a lot of times that's what music feels like, or at least to someone who writes a lot of musical compositions. That's what I would imagine it is. It's analyzing notes and being able to apply them very quickly. So if we wanted to maybe try to psychoanalyze a few of these composers, I would say that it's a high likelihood that they could have some sociopathic tendencies, and possibly some sociopathic traits that kind of lend themselves into helping them develop their skills and being able to find those patterns and analyze the data and apply it. Some women admired him for his genius, while others found him repulsive. I mean, yeah, some women find intelligent men hot, and, for others, intelligence doesn't overlook this. A woman he courted once called him ugly and half crazy. And I would not doubt that. Taking into account what we psychoanalyze about him, half crazy sounds about right. Not that there's anything wrong with being sociopathic, but it's not exactly the standard mentality. I'm sorry if I'm being offensive here. Ludwig, Beethoven was sickly throughout his life. I don't doubt that. He suffered from being deaf. We all know that. Colitis, rheumatism, rheumatic fever, typhus, skin disorders, abscesses, skin disorders and abscesses. Sounds like he might have had, hepatitis. Variety of infections. The film. There's just some shit in here. Inflammatory degradation of the arteries, jaundice, chronic hepatitis, and cirrhosis of the liver. This dude was just fucked up. It's a surprise that the dude was even fucking making music. Ludwig's deafness probably resulted from childhood illness. So he wasn't born deaf. It slowly began to take over his life, and it's probably a good thing that he wasn't born deaf, because he probably wouldn't have gained that basic understanding of instruments and the ability to play. Maybe it was a constant surrounding of orchestra instruments and having to play in that kind of surrounding that led to the degradation of his hearing. This here also says that it could be from illness. Throughout, Beethoven attributed the beginning of his deafness to an instance in which he was startled and fell. It was likely a side effect of a disease he had suffered from as a child, such as typhus or smallpox. Sounded like he might have just hit his fucking head real hard. That's my initial thought when I hear someone fell and became deaf. It's not typically typhus is my first conclusion, or smallpox. Um, I'm not sure if those have an effect on the hearing or maybe the sinus, but I think typhus definitely. Oh, I guess smallpox would have an effect on your sinus, but I don't know. It's such a weird thing. He began to hear a constant buzzing at the age of 27. So yeah, and again with the symptom of buzzing, it sounds like it was just damage to his eardrum. Typically, when you start hearing that ringing or buzzing noise, it's because you perforated your eardrum one too many fucking times, and it's just not going to be the same after that. A lot of times, whenever people start developing that kind of symptoms, um, you can take this as a tip if you are experiencing it. Sleeping with a fan on, white noise emulators are really helpful for those kinds of situations. But yeah, definitely sounds more like some kind of ear damage to me than smallpox. But I could be wrong. Beethoven wrote sonatas for his love interest. Well, that's sweet of him. Sonata number 14 in C sharp minor, popularly called Moonlight Sonata if you didn't know, was a hit from the time of its completion in 1801. The following year, Beethoven dedicated it to his pupil and main squeeze, Countess... Ooh, we're going to try this again. Guiletta Guiccardi. I don't think I did bad. I'm going to stick with that and get hate on it later, and that's cool. Ludwig van Beethoven hated giving piano lessons. Well, I mean, if you're so good that you probably don't even know what the fuck you're doing to be that good, and you can't hear what the fuck you're doing, it probably gets pretty irritating trying to explain it to someone else. So I can understand that. I'm sure Neil Tyson gets fucking irritated sitting there and podcasts constantly explaining obvious shit to people that could also just look it up on the internet like we're doing now. It's not as fun doing it yourself, obviously, but it's definitely something you can do to expand your knowledge, and it's something worth doing on your own just for the fun. You always learn something interesting. But I would assume like Neil Tyson doesn't like sitting there and giving lectures constantly. That's sure that's also why he seems to enjoy being on Theo Von's like podcast a lot more, is because Theo is like actually interactive with him. He makes him fucking laugh like every fucking few sentences. It's honestly very wholesome and great to see Theo Von and Neil on the same podcast. I absolutely love seeing them together. But continue on with Beethoven. Symphony number 3 in E flat major was dedicated to Napoleon. Napoleon and his constituents really enjoyed the classical musics of their time, apparently. Paganini was employed by Napoleon's, was it sister or cousin or something like that? At first, Beethoven admired Napoleon as a symbol of revolution and new era in Europe, and wrote his third symphony, also called Eroica, as he considered moving to Paris. Later, Beethoven would be disappointed that the French general crowned himself emperor, but the symphony would be a defining artistic work of the German Enlightenment. I guess he respected himself until he overstepped his boundary, I guess. I don't know. that's kind of I wonder what his thought process during that time was. What crowning himself emperor meant to Beethoven. Friedrich Schiller provided lyrics for Ludwig van Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Schiller, a leading German philosopher, published his poem On die Freude, Ode to Joy. In 1786, Beethoven adapted the poem for the glorious choral climax of his Symphony No. 9 in D minor, first performed in 1824. I always fucking hated the way composers titled their works. Honestly, it is the most fucking annoying way to keep track of music. I'm sure it worked for them because they were only really interested in their own music at that time. Seems like a lot of composers in those days were very egotistical. So to them, I'm sure it made a lot of sense to just being like, yeah, this is my Ninth Symphony, and it's in D minor, or it's in E flat. Like, it made sense to them, but from the perspective of an audience, like, I'm not gonna be like, I know fucking Symphony No. 9 was Ode to Joy. I'm sure a lot of people probably actually do, but I don't. And I know it more as Ode to Joy than fucking that. It's just always like, I always love classical music anytime it comes on, like on the radio, and like I'm like flipping through channels and it pops up. It's like, it always fits the mood. That's a great thing about classical music. It will always fit the mood. But the names that the composers give them is just astoundingly annoying. Ludwig van Beethoven never quit his day job. I didn't even know he had a day job. Despite his acclaim, the composer always had to work hard to ensure a comfortable living by giving piano lessons. He fucking hated his day job. The dude, it explained earlier that the dude fucking hated giving piano lessons, and, you know, I don't fucking blame him. But, writing work commissioned by wealthy Viennese citizens and publishing his own music. But, having to have a day job that you hate, it's the whole destitute, the financial destitute that's so common amongst musicians, is he chose to continue a part of the job that he hated just to continue to do the job that he loved. And you gotta commend him for that. If you're a genius and you're just laying down the knowledge for another person just for the sheer sharing knowledge, that's commendable. But doing it for money, even though you fucking hate it, so you can support just being able to do it more, that's a different kind of respect, I guess. Poor guy. But at least he didn't hit the destitute, or at least as far as I know so far. In 1827, at age 56, Beethoven died from a constellation of possible maladies, including cirrhosis, syphilis, lead poisoning, or infection. The exact cause is unknown, so it could be any of those: cirrhosis, syphilis, lead poisoning, or infection, or maybe it could be a possible combination of a few. We don't know. Gerard von Breuning, the son of Beethoven. Oh, actually, didn't we read an article a few moments ago that they did post-mortem biological testing on him, forensic testing, and it was more than likely the lead poisoning. Spoiler, it's most likely lead poisoning. The son of Beethoven's friend, Stefan von Breuning, compared the occasion to the composer's symphonies with crashes that sound like hammering on the portals of fate. That sounds like a good way of going out. Thousands joined the processions at Ludwig van Beethoven's burial. Vienna's leading composers, playwrights, poets, and citizens took part in the city's roaring cemetery. His monument said simply, Beethoven. That's all you fucking need when you're a boss-ass bitch like that. You know, all you need to really be that fucking known person, when you're that known, to establish yourself, all you need is your name. That's how you know you're a boss bitch. Alrighty. What are we moving on to? Mozart. Let's talk about Mozart for a bit. Did we not talk about him a little bit? Then we got a bit distracted. Argued that Leopold's behavior was necessary for his son to become a success. We already figured that out between the tropes. And that the long tours and instruction in the practical aspects of making a living as an artist were necessary. I mean, it is important to know how to survive as an artist, and I'm sure his father wanted him to enjoy that free lifestyle and be able to live in that lifestyle. But nevertheless, it's disturbing to read passages from Maynard Solomon's book Mozart, A Life, in which Leopold is discussed as allegedly forcing his son upon the world as a miracle prodigy, and seeing Wolfgang's love of fun and joy as something to be controlled and even discouraged in favor of discipline and constant work. There might be too many modern examples of child stars who are pushed to extremes by overbearing parents to not find the story of Leopold and his treatment of Wolfgang more than a little disturbing. Yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly what went on in that time period. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of evidence that points to his father actually being abusive. Wolfgang broke away from his father's influence as he got older. I mean, it seems a lot more like his father was just trying to influence him as much as possible rather than, abuse him and force him to play. So I think he got off kind of light compared to a couple other people we talked about today. Little baby face. Well, that's a good bit about the classical arts. I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed learning the things we learned today. Really enjoyed just being able to talk and just learn more about the classical world. It was fantastic to just sit here with y'all, really, and just sleuth, which is the main concept of our channel right now, I guess, at least for the live streams. It's just being able to sit down, relax, and just enjoy the fact that we're learning new things and that we're finding new things to learn about. I'm not sure exactly what our next stream will be about, but until then, hopefully I'll be able to curate a soundtrack so that it's easier for people to be listening to during the moments where we have stale air. But I do look forward to doing this again very soon. Thank you all for stopping by. Thank you for checking out the video after it's published. And yeah, we just I really hope to see you again soon.